stay on track. On Mo Dondong's side, after searching out more than 10 identical copies, he couldn't tell which one he needed. For a while he was frozen in place as well. Time slowly consumed past until more than half an hour had passed. He hadn't searched for a good solution yet, and after weighing his options, he turned around and found Shidanzi speaking. Hypocritical old man, how's it going over there? I really can't. Let's start working together. In 2 sentences, his purpose was directly stated. Mo Dondong is this nature. Straightforward. Otherwise he wouldn't be so crazy. Okay, this thing is able to cooperate. After thinking for a moment, Shidanzi answered directly. Anyone who could come this far was either extremely gifted and talented, or his means had something unique about him. Otherwise the previous test wouldn't have been so simple to pass. And to top it all off, he also came to the extremely important hurdle of getting into trouble. If he could communicate with the other party, then it would be extremely simple to refine this elixir. It's this degree of communication that seems to need to be mastered. After all, the two of them were also existences that did not know each other, and it was only the simplest of collaborations now. Tell us about your progress. Red Danzi was worthy of being an old fox, and as soon as he opened his mouth, he pried into Mo Dondong's bottom line. Alright, the two of us aren't very familiar with each other, so let's not get too involved in this matter. The program we're working together on now is that one person is one kind of elixir called for a change. How about that? Merdenton wouldn't let the other party get his way so quickly, and immediately explained the rules of the deal. Only by trading this way does he reap the highest rewards. There's no need to be afraid of the other person looking to find out how far they've explored. First, let me start. The first piece is the Spirit Plum Blossom, in which it has a harmonizing effect. At that moment, Mo Dondong opened his mouth to throw out a drug. Okay, this stuff is real. Red Danzi probed and immediately distinguished that this kind of thing was what he needed. Shidanzi also immediately turned over and exchanged what he needed. So the two of them just started calling and exchanging messages. One from you and one back from me. It's the only way that what they're trading is the most balanced. I've got this thing. After exchanging more than a dozen types of spirit medicines, the two began to repeat more of them. It seemed that the two had exchanged enough information to almost begin the refining process. Chu Feng on the other side also didn't know that the two people over here were starting to join forces, causing their progress to speed up. If he hadn't looked for a way to break the game, then Chu Feng would be the last hangman. However, all of this was none of Chu Feng's business because this time Chu Feng was all in the midst of resting. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care, because it's useless to him. All it takes is the ability to develop great power quickly. He didn't bother going over there and trading with the other side because who knows if the other side might be up to no good. Pretending that something exists on it means that it's real. But then again, not being sure. This can lead to problems with a pot of elixir, which is the possible outcome of an exchange that occurs. That would be a big change in the situation here. After more than 2 hours had passed, Chu Feng shook his drowsy head and gradually woke up. After waking up, Chu Feng no longer cared, and immediately began to explore. Go on. Without realizing it, the two groups on the other side of the room found all the materials and prepared to start refining them. At that moment, Chu Feng had just managed to finish lining up the remaining 1/3 of the spirit medicines. For Chu Feng, this was already extremely fast. Unconsciously, more than an hour slowly passed. Phew! Chu Feng, who had been keeping his head down, probing the medicinal properties of the spirit medicine, found all the results inside. At the same time, he also configured 3 different spirit medicines up, and when he waited until the back, what Chu Feng carried out was the refining. Boo! There was a loud explosion, which was directly transmitted inside Chu Feng's ears, and even the barrier that Linger had put down seemed to be a bit bad, violently pulling both sides of his mind completely over. Chu Feng looked up and just managed to see a confused Mo Dondong. At this time the other party was still extremely arrogant, but after experiencing such a setback, his face also became a bit dismayed. Looks like this guy failed and received internal injuries. Chu Feng looked at the trace of blood at the corner of his opponent's mouth, and his face could not help but become grave. Looking at the situation, the danger of refining this elixir is still extremely high. If you accidentally blow up the furnace, even the alchemist will be in danger. As Chu Feng looked at such a situation, his face became extremely complicated. It seems like I need to be a bit more careful before I can do so. Otherwise it would be bad if something goes wrong. Chu Feng slowly made plans in his heart. Rest for half an hour and start refining immediately. Boo! There was another crunching sound, and Chu Feng's gaze could not help but turn to the other side. As expected, the Red Danzi over here was no exception and directly blew up the furnace. Luckily, his strength was still extremely high and he didn't suffer much damage. However, on Z Linger's side, her face couldn't help but turn white. Should have been shocked by the blast furnace. Begin! When Chu Feng saw this situation, he also knew that this time, the alchemy had become even more difficult. The heart couldn't help but have a few more wary looks. After all, it looks like the danger of this blowing up the furnace is extremely high for the kind that started it all. If you don't pay attention, you may have problems. However, this is a hurdle that needs to be crossed anyways. Chu Feng did not care about that and directly began to refine it. If he was afraid, he wouldn't have thought to take the risk. With the spiritual energy running underneath, the spiritual medicine was quickly poured into it. Refining, liquefying, decluttering, and other actions can be done in one fell swoop. When Chu Feng came to the fourth action mixing moment, the medicinal properties of the elixir inside violently rioted. Before Chu Feng could react, boo! An explosive sound shook Chu Feng's ears, and for a moment, he could not hear the surrounding situation. Even a burst of smoke came out from inside the alchemy furnace. Moreover, a scorched odor slowly drifted out, and Chu Feng felt extremely uncomfortable as he smelled it. There's something wrong with the dispensing this time. After Chu Feng packed everything away, he recalled the reason why the refining process went wrong. It didn't take long to think back to the process of mixing the liquid, where the spirit liquid stormed out. Chu Feng, who had extremely rich experience in alchemy, immediately knew where this situation appeared. It should just be that the elixir he configured himself appears to be a different elixir. That's what caused the problem with the elixir. Next pair. Regarding this situation, Chu Feng was also extremely clear about it. After all, how could he say that he was also an alchemist who was not even a small rookie? It's only by chance that I've mastered some of the techniques. Wanting to configure and refine such an elixir in one go was not even a thought. After all, the refining of this elixir was definitely not simple, and it also contained an extremely strong attribute of change and explosion. These are not easy to control. That's why he's been prepared for this for a long time, not waiting for which continues to play back. There is also the other two sides of the Red Danzi and Mo Dandong, two people's reaction. Chu Feng's life had always been a boring process of learning and refining. This time was no different, and the current him was still refining the explosive amazing Dan. As long as he succeeded in refining it, he would be able to judge his own strength. And there was a huge boost to his strength. In addition, the most important thing was to obtain the Audit Alchemist's inheritance. End of chapter. Chapter 125, Trauma. Chapter 125, Trauma. It seems like this explosive amazing Dan god is trying to find an alchemist with research skills. Chu Feng muttered and whispered. At the fourth level of refining the Peiyuan Dan, hints began to appear. Now with the start of the fifth level, the hints are even more obvious. Otherwise this wouldn't have been used as a test. Without realizing it, the second refining had also reached a critical moment. Fusion. Sweat appeared to coalesce at high speed above Chu Feng's forehead, looking extremely nervous. The previous steps were all extremely simple for Chu Feng. This is the only one that is the toughest. The fact that this step could be accomplished proved that there was no problem with this Dan formula and that it was right. Fused. All that's left is to control the medicinal properties to condense the Dan. Chu Feng wiped a handful of sweat from his face, and his face turned slightly pale. This is a sign of excessive depletion of divine thoughts and essence. The refinement of the explosive amazing Dan was too difficult. The medicinal properties of the main elixirs among them were all extremely violent existences. If you're not careful, you'll just blow up the furnace, making all the work you've done earlier useless. Previously, if it wasn't for the existence of the amazing explosive Dan divine demonstration technique, it would have been extremely difficult for him to concoct a third-grade amazing explosive Dan alone. One of the main reasons was that the medicinal properties of the spirit medicine of the amazing explosion pill were too violent. Without special means and also techniques to control, extremely easy to explode, and those are the first difficulties. Chu Feng had an extremely strong divine idea presence, causing his control to be extremely fine, so the first few levels breezed past him. However, an extreme amount of divine thoughts were also consumed here. Conjugate. As a cold cry rang out, Chu Feng's spiritual energy moved violently and surged directly inside the Dan furnace. His strong control force forcibly mixing the riotous spiritual liquid, making them coalesce into an elixir. Boom boom. The spiritual liquid suddenly rioted under Chu Feng's forced confluence. Something's wrong. Pust. Chu Feng discovered this situation before he could come to use his divine thoughts to put it right. Under the violent riot, it directly damaged Chu Feng's divine idea, causing him to directly suffer internal injuries under his failure to react. Boo. The chain reaction had not completely disappeared, and without Chu Feng's control, the exploding amazing Dan directly exploded inside the alchemy furnace. Vajra Talisman. Open. Bright Light Shield. Open. Fine Rain Sword Formation. Open. Sensing the crisis that had appeared in the alchemy furnace, Chu Feng hurriedly used all of his means, defend against these explosions. At the same time, he was also putting all the spirit medicines here into his storage bag in one go. Boo! With an explosion, the elixir, Chu Feng, platform, and so on all exploded, and a large pit appeared on the large platform all of a sudden. Boom boom. This great energy, all of a sudden, got Chu Feng out of the way. Phew. Chu Feng took a deep breath and minimized the pain. It didn't occur to him that this had instead triggered the injuries within his body. It's finished. I was overly anxious this time, and instead of refining the elixir, my body was all heavily injured. After sensing the situation within his body, he couldn't help but let out a bitter smile. I'll probably be able to refine the elixir once more, and if I'm still not able to succeed, I might not be able to get it this time with the divine alchemy. Chu Feng estimated the situation inside his body for a while and had an understanding of his situation. We won't be able to go over recklessly this time. We'll have to take our time. Chu Feng let out a low sigh. There's only one more chance now, which means it's hopeless if it doesn't work. Boo! Boo! There were 2 more explosions in quick succession, which shook even the barrier. Chu Feng did not need to look at them to know that the 2 of them had failed as well. It seems like it's not good to take the inheritance this time. From here, Chu Feng immediately analyzed that these 2 had failed just like him. I just don't know where the problem is anymore. Is the injury serious anymore? Let's first recuperate and nourish our injuries a bit while summarizing the intelligence about the 4th grade explosive amazing Dan before we start refining it. Chu Feng took out a healing pill from inside his storage bag and swallowed it in one gulp, closing his eyes to refine the pill and heal his injuries. Fellow Daoist Mo, any ideas? Red Danzi packed up all the pills from the blown furnace, and turned his head to look for Mo Dandong. He looked extremely bad now. His shiny white hair blackened. Looks like the blast furnace traumatized him as well. Zilinger was also standing on the side at this time, not knowing what to do. Although he and she were extremely talented, even Red Danzi couldn't get it right, let alone her as a 2nd grade alchemist. Not bad, Merdenton said faintly. Alright then. Hearing his words, Red Danzi also knew that he couldn't get information from the other party, turned around and left. Damn it, is this damn thing so hard? I can't even make it to liquefaction. Merdenton's face twisted up extremely. This was already the 4th furnace of pills he had refined. Originally, he thought that with luck he would be able to go on quickly, but who knew that although he was able to detect the situation in advance and circumvent it, but his operation and his consciousness couldn't keep up, directly letting all 4 of his potions explode. And when Red Danzi came over to inquire, although he knew that he couldn't refine it down, he couldn't possibly show it directly. It seems that we can only wait and see if another player can communicate. As a last resort, Mo Dandong alone was only able to pin his hopes on Chu Feng's side. Just like that, the 2 began to refine it again, and neither of them dared to say how far the ground of refining had reached. Prevent others from finding out what they are up to now. Divine Amazing Palace, a land of misty immortal aura and many spiritual medicines. In a huge palace, a young girl wearing a moonlight white immortal dress sat above, eyes locked on a huge mirror in front of him to check it out. This mirror was divided into 3 parts, each with a different content inside. In each section there were several figures either moving or sitting in a coiled position. Upon closer inspection, wasn't that precisely the image of Chu Feng and Mo Dandong and the others? At that moment, Chu Feng was cultivating and recuperating his body injuries with his eyes closed. On the other side, Mo Dandong was staring at the alchemy furnace in front of him with crimson eyes, staring dead on. From time to time, he converted his spiritual energy, while later on, he put in a spiritual medicine with his hands and feet, completely lacking in Chu Feng's simplicity and flowing control. As for Chidanzi's side, Zilinger was constantly watching the situation in the alchemy furnace, listening to his master's words from time to time as he placed an elixir in, and Red Danzi's fiery red spiritual energy quickly surged in, slowly stirring and refining. Looking at the bashful expressions of the 2 inside, one could also tell that the 2 had a bit of confidence. There's absolutely no sign of Merdenton's angst. It seems that the first search for a new inheritor is hopeless, and Lord Palace Master's hopes can only be put on the back burner. Gazing inside, a hint of disappointment flashed in the pretty young girl's eyes. From here, it could be seen that the refining techniques of the 2 men, Red Danzi and Mo Dandong, as well as the refining process were extremely juvenile and unimpressive in the eyes of the young girl. Originally, I thought that this teenager would be able to bring about a lot of success, but who knew that something had gone wrong, making this alchemy an unforeseen circumstance, resulting in no possibility of anyone being able to refine the elixir. After all, how could it be refined when even the elixir inside the formula is wrong? The teenager's Dan formula and dispensing were all right, but unfortunately, he was too impatient, resulting in only one more chance, which is not enough. The young girl shook her head, a bleak look flashing in her eyes. Looks like we'll have to continue to stay here and not be able to go out and have fun. She had survived here for who knows how long. This one out was nothing more than an unforeseen circumstance. According to the palace master's message, This place would have to wait for at least 10,000 more years before a true genius could emerge to inherit this place. So she can get out. Forget it, this time it's just an accidental event. When the energy here depletes a bit, the divine amazing palace will return to the inner layers of the void. And what happens in the outside world will be none of my business. The young girl sighed, slowly lowering her head. But there was still